Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Chatty Cuppa. Today we talk about things that we experience all the time. We have it flowing through our bodies. We touch base with it from the universe. And every single thing on earth is made up of this. It's energies. Every single thing on earth is made up of energies. And we all have our own energy fields. The energy fields that we radiate attracts what we actually want into our lives. So when we start to look within ourselves, you'd be surprised you can actually pick up on energies that are flowing through you. Now, as a Reiki master, I totally believe with universal energies flowing via you, flowing through you, and I also believe that your energies that you radiate to the outside world will attract exactly what you put out there. Now, today we have an energy expert, and we have beautiful, the most calm, serene. Whenever I speak to Lucy, I always get this beautiful feeling of calmness. Today we have Lucy Ascham, and she is a family systemic constellation facilitator. And when she was a teenager, she used to suffer with stage fright. She used to play, she was part of a musical band and she played the cornet. Is that right, Lucy? Yeah. And she used various methods in her own healing because she's now using these methods on other people, especially women. She has worked with over thousands of people, and she now has learned so many different techniques to tap into the energies of people that she works with. She's studied the Alexandra technique, she's also studied family and systemic constellation, and she has had incredible experiences tapping into her own strengths. And now we invite her as an energy expert on the Chatty Kappa, because on the Chatty Kappa, we are always ready to inspire other people by igniting and finding your own energies within yourself. So, welcome, Lucy. Welcome to the Chatty Kappa. I'm so humbled to have you here today.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And tell us a little bit more about yourself because I want to get to know Lucy, the energies within Lucy. Tell me a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so as you said, I used to be in a band when I was a teenager, so it was a brass band, and I travelled quite a lot, and we went to Canada and we went to Europe, London, all sorts of different places. And when I was in the band, it was great because, I had people around me and I felt quite comfortable. But then when I was able to study music and I went to college at Dartington, then what happened was that I was standing on my own in front of an
The
audience.
pressure.
Suddenly the pressure got hotter, exactly. And then what I realized was that I'm quite tall, I'm nearly 5'11". And I didn't particularly want to be that tall. I stood out a little bit from the crowd and I wanted to join in with other people. And I was trying to stay small whilst actually playing a very loud instrument that's basically saying, notice me, hear me, this is what I'm doing. So it was this tension between how I was sort of on the inside and how I needed to be on the outside that actually created like a tug of war in terms of tension, me pulling it in both ways at once inside myself. And my coordination went to pot. So basically, my lips and tongue were doing one thing, my breathing a second thing, my fingers a third, my eyes a fourth. And it was just, it was a really horrible mess. So it was uncomfortable for me, but also for people in the audience as well, of course. And so somebody fortunately recommended the Alexander technique to me. And I didn't know a thing about it, but I went along and I had some free sessions with the third year trainee students. And they would just sort of work very delicately at sort of rebalancing my head and my spine, encouraging me to take up my full space. So instead of
Yeah.
shrinking into this smaller me, that was the new habit, if you like, I then sort of re-expanded and just began to take up my full space and shape, which helped my breathing, it helped my confidence, it helped my poise, helped all sorts of different things.
So you started embracing who you were.
I did. I did. And so many different spin offs and benefits from that. My eyesight improved. And when I got in the car, I would have to adjust my rear view mirror because I got taller. So many different things. Yeah.
You know what? I came across a saying, the magic begins in you. You feel your own energies, you realize similar energies exist within the earth, within the stones, within the plants, the water, the wind, the fire, colors, animals. And I know that we all have, and we radiate at a certain frequency, and we radiate at certain energy levels. Can you tell us a little bit more about the term energy?
Mm, I love it. Yeah, so for me, energy is life force. It is, the fundamental stuff that we're made of. It's the basic ingredients that we are as human beings. We're made of energy, but it's also our fuel. So it's, how we breathe, how we move, how we think, all of those things rely on energy. And what many of us don't realize is that we've got some stored energy in our body, but it's not in a good way, but in terms of it's trapped. And so that can be with our muscles being a little bit kinked and tight and, bent around because that's the way people have habits in terms of the way they fold their arms, or they might stand on one side, or all these things that we call personality. But these are the way that we do ourselves and the way that we do our everyday activities.
And you talk about personality. In Hinduism, I'm a Hindu, and we believe in sanskars, and that is the energy, is that personality, the energy that makes our personality and our character. And I know that you've written a chapter in a book, and I know that it was like a number one bestseller on Amazon, and it was Energy, You Unleash Your Inner Power. Now, I love the way you use this metaphor of a hose pipe. And I totally believe it, but I've never seen it. I always look at it, I look at energies like when it's not flowing, like a bamboo that's filled with gunk, and we need to take like a bottle brush and clean it out. But I love your host, this metaphor of a hose pipe. Can you explain a little bit more about it, please?
Yeah, well, I think it does probably have some gunk in it as well. But for me, I see the flow of energy. If it was a hose pipe and it was all sort of smooth and cylindrical and everything was working well, then what would happen is that the energy would flow and we'd be able to do what we want to do. We'd have enough energy for it, and things would be going well in our lives. What happens though sometimes is that life events, things that have happened to us, can actually then cause the hose pipe to have a kink in it, or somebody might be treading on it, or it might have got a bit knotted and a bit dry in the sun. There's all sorts of reasons why the energy is not flowing so well.
Oh gosh, and I can give you quite a few too. Before I started my Reiki practice, it was like, like missing home. There's somebody stepping onto my hose pipe. The pressures of life. There's more kinks in those hose pipes. Yeah, carry on. Please elaborate and tell us a little bit more about what happens when there's a somebody stepping on that hose pipe, and what happens to the energies.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, your example of missing home. So, if you've migrated from another country, it's a huge wrench. So, even if you decide and you choose to do it and you're, looking for a different life, there's still the things that you're missing, and the people and the land that you're missing, and the culture and the food and all of those things. So, I'm imagining that being a bit of a kink into that hose pipe, and there's some energy that kind of gets left behind potentially, and not kind of flowing into your body and your life. So I'm not talking specifically about you, Nirasha. I'm just saying generally,
Yeah.
people leave, their homeland and go somewhere else. This is one of the common themes.
But I felt it. You know what? I did feel it. And by you just turning, twisting your hand, and I could feel like that part of my life I left behind. and I couldn't let it be I couldn't find ways of having it in my present and future. But it's weird how when you shift that energy and when you straighten out that host pipe, you'd find that life just gets better. You start to accept it, and you start to make life work for you in that situation.
Yeah. And I think sometimes what happens is that people will then sort of somehow, the pipe will get so twisted that it almost becomes knotted.
Yeah.
And if it would be possible, then there would be a sort of diversion. So this bit wouldn't be really kind of inhabited anymore, but it's still storing energy. And so a lot of people in our sort of medical model will kind of say, well, we cut out the broken bit, or we have to strengthen the other bit, and this bit needs to go to the gym, and we need to do more. And I'm thinking, well, how can we really include this part that's got not so much energy flowing to it, because it's holding on to something precious for us. How can we bring our love and attention to that and include it? We don't have to like it, but we have to include it as part of our lived experience.
And then we can balance it. We can actually tap into other energies at different other parts of our body, and give it that TLC, give it that that little TLC sometimes we need. Like for example, when people are suffering with a headache, I also do a lot of work with chakras and things like that, energy points in the body. And when people are suffering with a headache, what do people do? They'll go for that headache pill, they'll go for a paracetamol. But when they have to just, if there was no paracetamol around, if there was no medicine like the medicine that the modern medicine, what would you do? You'd actually go and give yourself that attention by taking a few moments and just massaging it, by maybe putting a bit of oil in your hand, giving your head a massage, or by rubbing a little bit of menthol on your temples, or even smelling some lavender or something like that. So those natural ways of remedying and giving that TLC to that energy block can actually make it flow again. And I think we need to do more. And I'm very passionate about spreading healing through energy healing, but also healing through the mindset, where you don't need to go for that paracetamol, or where you don't need to go and make sure you need tons of injections in your body to make it work properly. Um, why is this so important to you, this energy work that you do?
Well, I suppose because life has put a few kinks and bumps into my hose pipe, if you like. So there have been a number of different things, from early childhood and through as a teenager, some normal teenage things, but they still leave a mark. They still make a dent, they still stop that flow. And so I've found that I've needed to have some support in terms of my own personal healing. And that as I grow, and as I want to serve more people, that actually I need a more consistent and steady flow of energy for myself, so that I can be there without being depleted when I'm working with people, that I can help them restore their energy and their connection to source.
What is your daily practice so that you protect your own energy, where you can always replenish your own energy levels?
Great question. So a lot of that is the Alexander technique. So for me, it's about trying to balance the amount of effort that I put out in terms of whatever work it is. And it could be simple things around the house, bending, cooking, cleaning, stretching, all of those things, doing it with the least amount of effort so that I get the most efficient outcome.
Give me some examples of it. So if I want to pick up a box, what do you do? How do you use the least amount of energy for that?
So typically when people pick things up, they tend to put a kink here in the head and neck joint. So they kind of go, I'm going to prepare, and they kind of, stiffen and brace themselves, not deliberately perhaps, but just this is what I see happening a lot of times. And so they've already kind of put a little kink in the system. So I wouldn't do that. And so it's an absence of doing the extra. Do you see? It's not that I have to stiffen and hold myself straight. It's the absence of the extras that will bring in the kink to the system.
Mm.
And then a lot of people hold their breath. And
Yeah.
so, again, I would encourage people to keep breathing and then to actually bend in the joints that are designed to be bent in. So, a lot of people mismap their body. They think there's a major joint here, they think there's a major joint at the top of their trousers or skirt, and there isn't. So, I help people to understand their anatomy in a simple way, where their joints are, and to think about it before they move. And that means the flow of energy is much more efficient and their muscles can work more powerfully.
So it's also like, when people are quite stressed, their muscles go into so many knots. And that knot, I usually explain to them, my clients, that that knot is actually energy that's bundled together and that causes that tightness in your muscles. And you're so right, because when our muscles are tightened and when we are quite stressed, everything else around us, our body starts to cave in. And I work a lot with stress, anxiety, depression, but I use hypnotherapy and rapid transformational therapy, tapping, emotional freedom techniques. And it's so great to actually have an expert like you that is teaching people how to consciously think about their bodies.
Exactly.
Because we use less than 1% of our conscious mind in everything we do. Daily activities, less than 1%. So everything that man does is below the surface, 99%, but we don't tend to tap enough in our conscious state. And I love this, being conscious, being present, and doing your daily work. Now, Wayne Dyer, he says, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at also change. Now, I love that saying, about him, the one that I always believe, like, Wayne Dyer is brilliant. He's written, I think, over 40 books, and he's done so much of work in personal development and spiritual growth. And I know that some common things that cause energy, these energy blocks in the body is, I think now what everybody is facing, lots of people are facing this, is grief and losing somebody, and fears of becoming ill, and so on. So, how would you actually connect with the energy of somebody that is going down this path?
I love the question. So I've got, I'm a big fan of Wayne Dyer, and that's one of my favorite quotes, in fact, because I love this idea that you bring a new perspective to something, and the changing perspective, looking at it in a different way and seeing all the things that are being influenced about this individual, for example, or the person's symptoms, that actually it can hugely affect the way that things can flow. So because I've got various different strands, so I am a Reiki master as well. I do Indian head massage, Alexander technique, and this family constellations work. So I draw on what I need for that person in the moment to take them on the next step. So, it's not the same for each person, and it's not the same, journey for anybody.
So, for example, Lucy, if I came to you with grief, how would you actually help me overcome this energy that's stuck in my heart?
Well, I think first to say that grief is an incredibly natural emotion, and it's a very useful emotion, but not very popular for us to actually be talking about in our society. It can be a bit of a taboo that we don't always kind of talk about it. We might be able to talk about it for a few weeks, and then it's like, better not keep on talking about it. The grieving process can go on for months and years, and that's very natural. So I provide a safe space for people to come to, and they can talk about whatever they want to talk about for as long as they need to talk about it. I don't say, oh, well, you mentioned that last Wednesday, so that's enough now. Really giving people space to be exactly how they are. And I'm helping them to sort of become more realigned and more embodied like you were saying earlier, the grief and tension can get sort of blocked in the muscles,
Mm,
in the cells. And that's the same with our emotions.
yeah.
And so, being a witness, a very kind of loving, compassionate witness, is already very helpful to help unblock some of that and start there to be a little bit of loosening around it. But also, we can see what else is involved. So, I'm talking about sometimes family history, but
Yeah.
also things that happened in the ancestral line. The number of times there are different patterns that keep repeating themselves.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It is so weird because you talk about, it's more like generational issues that follow from one generation to the other, because it's a kind of behavior that they've learned and it's been passed on. And I have so many clients that I work with various issues, grief being one of them, and stress, anxiety, depression. And it's weird how most of the way the present behavior is stems from the past. And some of them actually, when I regress them even into past lives, some of them actually bring in those energies, those feelings, those emotions from that, from that long ago. And it's just, I am always in awe whenever I work with people, and whenever people choose you for their journey, it's like they actually sense your energy and they want to work with your energy. And because it's the rapport that you build, the rapport is actually the energy that you actually tap into from the other person, and you work with that energy. Now, I know you use the word leak energy into the body to release tension. I love this whole idea of you being the plumber, the energy plumber, and you fixing up these leaks. But how do you do this? It's so interesting. Leak energy into the body to release tension. Wow.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm doing the leaking. I think that I'm identifying that other people's energy is leaking in some way. There are some holes, there are some gaps, some
Okay.
rips or tears. And so we're looking at repairing that in some way. So it's more of a metaphor.
Okay.
And we're looking at how we can, instead of sending the tubes, we're not sending that to the gym to get stronger and tighter. We're not doing that. It's more like, well, what's getting in the way? Is there a pin, or is there a life event where somebody who's not very good for us is actually still, somehow literally being a thorn in our side? And if we can get that bit out of the way, then actually we can heal. We're not just like a rubber hose pipe. We've actually got healing properties. But it's more like when we figure out what's getting in the way, what shouldn't be there, what is no longer useful. So, for example, when we have a trauma, and that might be an accident or an injury, but it could be a life event that is just so shocking that we don't have the capacity to deal with all of that in the moment. And so what I do is, when people are ready, we work together to help them really become more present. And it's more like we can go in layer after layer and help to integrate those experiences through warmth, through resonance, through
Love.
containing, love, through containing, them in terms of what belongs to them and what belongs to other people and other
Yeah.
times. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because I totally agree with you. Um, I know that love resonates in energy in the body at the cellular level. Grief is another energy that elongates your heart. It actually changes the shape of your heart. And if you think about people that are quite controlling, you know, their energies affect their limbs. People that are scared to walk forward in life because they've had a bad experience in their past. And you would actually find like they suffer with their knees and their limbs and their feet. And it's weird how when you start to explain to people that their energies are affecting their bodies because there's a blockage, like what you've been explaining, that when they understand the concept, they start to learn their own ways of unblocking that and pulling out that thorn. And they realize that self-love and faith in oneself. And even that tenderness, like what you spoke about, it's so pure, it's so beautiful to actually, for anybody self-healing. Now, I know that you've worked with a whole various different types of um, situations or events or whatever. So, what are some of the ways that we can become overwhelmed with tension in the body? Because tension is something. It's stress is actually an emotional and mental tension in the body. Illnesses are actually tension in the body. Um, so, what are some of the ways that you've experienced, you've come across that people become overwhelmed with this tension in the body? Some examples, but if you could just elaborate a little bit about that tension. What happens if that tension is ignored?
Mm. Well, a lot of people are very good at ignoring tension. Inconvenient. It gets in the way of their to-do list. It gets in the way of them being able to, uh, you know, function in life as well. So quite often people ignore the tension and they just work a bit harder, and then they actually tense more. So it's unfortunate that it has the opposite effect from what they're intending. And so I'm thinking about one client I wrote about in that chapter in the book. Somebody in America, I've never met her face to face, we work on Zoom.
Yeah.
She came because she'd got problems with her neck and shoulder. So she'd had breast cancer, she'd had surgery, and there was a constant sort of pull in her neck. And when we were working together, she described the tension as if she was being strangled. So this is a very unusual situation, and suddenly she remembered, oh, her granddad actually died of strangulation. So there would be various different ways of working with her. If I was with her in person, I could do some massage, I could send her some Reiki healing, I could help her release the tension here in her, using her mind and muscle together. I decided that I would use the constellations lens and looking at in terms of her and her grandfather, and somehow there was an energetic link that out of love for her grandfather she'd unconsciously taken on something for him, trying to make his experience less. And so when we can actually disentangle that, untying the knot in that hose, if we go back to that one, then actually he gets left with his fate and she gets left with hers, and that's a whole lot clearer. And so she said even after the one session her posture had improved so much that her friends were looking at her going, wow, what happened to you? And
That's
after working
amazing.
together for a few months we were able to really help maintain that so that she's got some tools.
That is absolutely amazing. For somebody to so quickly learn something and then their physical body releases it and then it affects their physical body. It's just simply amazing. I'll give you this example. I was working last week with a 15-year-old teenager, and it's so weird that that child was feeling so anxious about everything, and the anxiety was more like a suffocating anxiety. And when I did hypnosis and we regressed this child went back to when he was 3 years old, and he was going for swimming lessons, and he was thrown into the pool by his instructor. So that suffocation was actually stemming from that experience. And I'm always in awe when I understand and when the client understands what really happens behind the scene. Now, what are your 3 greatest tips for for people to connect with their energies so that they could heal their bodies?
So for me they're quite simple things that people can do, and it's a practice, so it's not a one-off that then they're cured, but quite often I see people storing energy through tension by not just resting on the ground. Without needing to change anything, if you just bring your attention to how you're resting on the ground and on your chair, and deliberately, consciously saying, yes, I'm going to let myself rest on this chair.
Yeah.
Quite often there's a little bit of a softening, a little bit of a sinking as we stop holding up, in our excitement and keenness to do well, or when we stop sort of pressing down either. So there's just a sort of, we come back to a calm and neutral, simple resting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I would ask people to
I
practice.
love that.
The other one is to stop holding your breath or pushing your air in and out. So by that I mean that quite often we have unconscious habits and tendencies for holding our breath. So like that experience of, you're going to pick up a box, people brace themselves, they hold their breath. And yet our breath is our fuel. We need to breathe often, And we stop holding our breath, that can be very useful.
And breath is also something that we can release toxins from our bodies. Our bodies release toxins through our breath. Therefore, breath healing is beautiful, and having the correct breath, breathing in and breathing out, is healing also. I love that.
And people often learn, different techniques for doing different things, but then they don't really go back to just being neutral and kind of leaving themselves alone. So this is one of the things I help people do. How do you leave yourself alone so that the tide of your breath can just come and go as required? Because it's incredible, when we're doing more physical stuff, our demand for air increases. Mm-hmm. And when we're starting to rest and relax more, then our demand for air decreases.
Yeah.
So we leave ourselves alone. We're not clamping our tummy muscles tight, and we're not holding our arms squeezed to our sides, and we're not gripping our arms here. Can get in the way. If we can learn to undo those without going sort of soggy with them, we're not relaxing, we're just coming back to our easy tone with the least amount of excess. Does that make sense?
Oh yes, definitely. It's I love how you put it. It's like leaving yourself alone, because we are constantly, we are human beings, but we are constantly doing, and we stop being, And I love that. My status on my WhatsApp for the last 3 years have been, we are human beings, not human doings. And that is so true, because that's a reminder to me that it's okay to not do anything, just let go.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah.
Can you give us one word that best sums up your vision for 2021?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go for support.
Mm-hmm.
It means lots of different things to me. So one of them is that simple thing of resting on the ground, letting gravity support us, being able to receive the support of the furniture. But it's also about having the support of, natural forces like the air coming and going, like love, like the exchange between two people. All of these things can be supportive as well.
Yeah.
I also know and believe that there are also invisible forces here for us as well, and we can get support from just connecting with our mind in terms of our peers and our family, or it could be our teachers, or it could be our ancestors. So there's lots of different ways that I'm talking about support.
Yeah.
And also the support that we can then give to others. So to our children, to our neighbours, to our family, to the people in the street that we come across. So support is my big word this year.
I love it. And I love it because first you support yourself, and then you can support the world. Absolutely. And the people around you. I love it. Just very quickly, I did one of your classes, one of the mornings a few weeks ago, and I loved just being on that floor. I do yoga nearly every morning, and I love that feeling of just lying there in corpse position where you can just let go. But what I found really interesting was you told us to put a towel behind the neck, and it actually gave a different experience, and it actually helped to release that tension on the neck. I just loved it. It was very, very, very good. Thank you for allowing me to be part of that class.
So can I just say that usually I actually recommend people put a book underneath their head. So it needs to be under your head and not on your neck, in fact.
Okay.
So that your body, so your bones really know they're supported. Just because if it's something here, then we can relax, but that looks after the soft tissue. If
Yeah.
it's a book under our head, then our bones know they're supported, and then the muscles don't have to try and add that tension.
Yeah.
Like they don't have to do the scaffolding. So
Oh yes, I remember you did, and I used my yoga block, and I put my head on my yoga block. Yes, that is so true. That was very nice. And we are so used to comforting our head with a soft pillow. So it was nice to actually do it with a hard block.
yeah,
It
exactly.
was,
Because it's the firmness that actually gives your bones the information that they are supported, and then the muscles can let go of the tension. That they're trying to be helpful, I believe.
yeah.
But they can let go of that tension, and we can just find out how to rest, which
And
is
you know what? That's the in our mind is such that our mind does what you do, it thinks you want it to do. So when we give ourselves physical things like this, tweaking certain behaviors, it tells our mind that we are becoming more flexible. And then our thoughts become more flexible, then life becomes, the energies change, and so on. I want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience with us. It's an absolute, it was an absolute delight just listening to the way our energies affect us. How can our listeners, contact you? Can you give us some?
yeah, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure talking with you, Narasha, and thank you for having me here.
Thank
So, one of the best ways is to contact me via my website, so www.lucyasham.com.
you.
And
Beautiful. And are you on any of the social media platforms?
I am, yes, and you can get a link to those from my website for sure.
Beautiful. That's amazing. And I'm going to finish off by saying, every morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters the most. And this was the beautiful words from Lord Buddha. So whatever you do today matters. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Chatty Cuppa. We are always, and we want to always rewire and inspire that spark, and to spark that inner fire in all of us. So thank you so much. Be blessed always. Remember what my mama says? She says, have an open heart and an open mind, and that is a key to your success and happiness. Lots of love. Be blessed always.